The gunshot echoed through the marble ballroom of the Valentino estate, shattering champagne glasses and silencing 300 of New York's most dangerous men mid-celebration. But Isabella Valentino didn't flinch. She stood at the top of the grand staircase in her blood-red gown, a smoking pistol in her trembling hand, staring down at the man she had loved for 3 years. The man whose father had just ordered the execution of her entire family. Marco Castellano looked up at her with those dark eyes that had once promised her forever, and whispered the words that would haunt them both: "Choose, Isabella. Him or me. Your blood or your heart." In that moment, surrounded by the weight of 2 mafia empires and the bodies of men who had died for loyalty, the daughter of New York's most ruthless crime lord learned the cruelest lesson of all. Sometimes love isn't enough to save you. Sometimes the only way to survive is to destroy the one thing you can't live without. But to understand how we got here, to understand how a forbidden love became a blood feud that would reshape the entire criminal underworld, we need to go back. Back to where it all began, on a rain-soaked night in Brooklyn, when Isabella Valentino first laid eyes on the one man she was never supposed to love. Part 1. The forbidden glance. Isabella Valentino had been raised in a world where loyalty wasn't just expected, it was written in blood across the bodies of those who betrayed it. At 24, she was her father's princess, the only daughter of Domenico Valentino, the man who controlled every illegal operation from the docks of Brooklyn to the penthouses of Manhattan. She had grown up surrounded by bodyguards and bullets, learning early that love was a luxury her family couldn't afford. The Valentino name meant power. It meant fear. It meant that men crossed the street when they saw her father's black Mercedes approaching, and politicians answered his calls at 3 in the morning. Isabella had been taught since childhood that there were 2 types of people in this world, the Valentinos and their allies, and everyone else who didn't matter. But there was one family that mattered. One family that stood as the only real threat to her father's empire. The Castellanos. For 3 generations, the Valentinos and Castellanos had carved up New York's criminal underworld between them, maintaining a careful, violent balance of power. They didn't socialize. They didn't do business together. They existed in parallel universes, each family knowing that one day, eventually, there would have to be a reckoning. Isabella's father had made the rules clear from the time she could walk: never trust a Castellano. Never speak to a Castellano. And God help you if you ever fall in love with one, because I'll kill you both myself. She had never questioned those rules. Why would she? The Castellanos were the enemy. That's all she needed to know. Until the night of the charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was one of those events where New York's legitimate elite rubbed shoulders with its criminal royalty, everyone pretending not to know where anyone else's money really came from. Isabella attended because her father required it, a show of respectability, a veneer of culture over the violence that funded their lifestyle. She wore a black Valentino gown, ironic, she thought, given her last name, that hugged every curve and made her look older than her 24 years. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and the diamond necklace around her throat cost more than most people's houses. She looked like exactly what she was, dangerous money wrapped in beauty. The museum was filled with Manhattan's finest, gallery owners, hedge fund managers, society wives, and scattered among them like wolves in expensive suits, representatives from every major crime family in the city. Isabella moved through the crowd with practiced grace, smiling at the right people, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, playing the role she had been born to play. That's when she saw him. He stood alone near a Caravaggio painting, his back to the crowd, completely absorbed in the artwork. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost $10,000. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it one too many times. And when he turned, sensing her gaze, she found herself looking into the most beautiful brown eyes she had ever seen. For a moment that stretched into eternity, they simply stared at each other across the crowded gallery. Isabella felt something shift inside her chest, something dangerous and unprecedented. This wasn't the casual attraction she'd felt for the carefully vetted men her father occasionally paraded in front of her. This was different. This was lightning striking, the ground shifting beneath her feet, every romance novel cliché coming true all at once. He smiled, slow, uncertain, as if he felt it too. She smiled back before she could stop herself. And that's when she saw the ring on his hand. Not a wedding ring, but something worse. A signet ring with a familiar crest. A lion devouring a serpent. The Castellano family crest. Isabella's blood turned to ice. She turned away quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Of all the men in New York, of all the people she could have felt that instant, undeniable connection with, it had to be him. It had to be a Castellano. She didn't look back. She forced herself to walk away, to rejoin her father's security detail, to pretend that moment had never happened. But for the rest of the night, she felt his eyes on her. And when she finally allowed herself one last glance before leaving, he was still watching her with an expression that said he knew exactly who she was too. And that he didn't care. Part 2, The Secret Courtship. Isabella told herself it was a moment of madness. A fleeting attraction that would pass. She threw herself into her father's business, taking on more responsibility in the family's legitimate enterprises, the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the import-export companies that laundered money from a dozen different illegal streams. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. Those eyes. That smile. The way he had looked at her like she was the only person in that crowded museum. 3 weeks after the gala, a package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a small painting, nothing expensive, just a street artist's interpretation of the Caravaggio they had both been admiring that night. And a card with a phone number and 4 words, coffee. No family required. She should have thrown it away. Should have told her father. Should have recognized it for what it was, a dangerous game that could only end badly. Instead, she texted the number, "This is insane." His response came immediately, "Insanity is letting fear make all your choices." They met the next day at a tiny coffee shop in Queens, far from the territories either family controlled. He was already there when she arrived, sitting in the back corner, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. "I didn't know what you liked," Marco Castellano said as she slid into the seat across from him. "So I got you what I'm drinking. If it's terrible, we'll blame my taste, not yours." "You know who I am," Isabella said. It wasn't a question. Isabella Valentino. Daughter of Domenico. Heir to an empire built on blood and fear. He took a sip of his coffee. "Also, according to my research, you have a degree in art history from Columbia, you volunteer at a women's shelter in the Bronx under a fake name, and you're secretly training in Krav Maga because you don't trust your father's bodyguards to always be there." Isabella stared at him. "You investigated me. You're a Valentino." "Of course I investigated you." His smile was disarming. "I'm Marco Castellano. Son of Antonio. Heir to an empire equally built on blood and fear. I have an MBA from Wharton, I run 3 legitimate tech startups that actually turn a profit, and I haven't killed anyone." He paused. "Yet. This is crazy," Isabella said, but she didn't leave. "Completely insane," Marco agreed. "Our families have been enemies for 70 years. If your father found out you were having coffee with me, he'd probably start a war. If your father found out, he'd kill you first and start the war second. So we agree this is a terrible idea. The worst." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marco leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost vulnerable. "I looked for you for 3 weeks. Went to every gallery, every museum, every place I thought you might be. I told myself I was being an idiot, that this was just some attraction that would fade. But it didn't fade, Isabella. It got stronger." Isabella's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "I tried to forget you too. And I can't." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. "I see you every time I close my eyes. And I don't even know you. Then let's fix that, Marco said simply. Let's get to know each other. No families. No empires. No blood feuds. Just two people who felt something real in a world full of fake everything. It was the beginning of the most dangerous 3 years of Isabella's life. They met in secret, quiet restaurants in distant neighborhoods, walks through Central Park at dawn before anyone they knew was awake, stolen hours in a rented apartment in New Jersey that neither family would ever think to look. They built a relationship in the margins of their dangerous lives, creating a world that existed separately from the violence and loyalty that defined them. Marco was nothing like Isabella had expected. He was kind where her world was cruel. He was honest where everyone else dealt in lies. He saw her not as Domenico Valentino's daughter or as a pawn in criminal empire building, but as Isabella. Just Isabella. With him, she could talk about art and philosophy and dreams of a different life. With him, she could admit that sometimes she hated the violence, hated watching her father order men to their deaths over perceived disrespect. With him, she could be soft, vulnerable, real. And Marco fell for her with the intensity of a man who had never expected to find something genuine in a world of calculated moves and strategic alliances. He loved her intelligence, her hidden compassion, the way she could switch from discussing Caravaggio to negotiating a business deal without missing a beat. He loved that she was strong enough to survive in a world that devoured the weak, but still kind enough to care about people her family considered collateral damage. They fell in love in secret, building a relationship they both knew was impossible. They made plans for a future they both knew they'd never have. And they held each other in the darkness, whispering promises they both knew they couldn't keep. For 3 years, they maintained the illusion. 3 years of stolen moments and careful lies. 3 years of existing in a bubble they had created outside of reality. But bubbles always burst. And when their world finally collapsed, it would collapse in blood and fire and impossible choices. Part 3, The Father's Discovery. Isabella should have known she couldn't hide forever. In a world where information was currency and surveillance was survival, someone was always watching. Someone always knew. Her father found out on a Tuesday. Isabella came home to their estate in Brooklyn to find Domenico Valentino sitting in his office, her phone in his hand, the burner phone she had been using to text Marco, the one she thought was untraceable. On his desk were photographs, her and Marco at that coffee shop in Queens, walking through Central Park, entering and leaving the Jersey City apartment. 3 years of secret love laid out in damning evidence. How long? Her father's voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than if he had been shouting. Domenico Valentino only got quiet when he was planning someone's death. Papa, how long? Isabella lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his eyes. 3 years. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, and she tasted blood where her teeth cut into her cheek. But she didn't cry. Valentino's didn't cry. 3 years, Domenico repeated, his voice shaking with rage. 3 years you've been fucking a Castellano behind my back. 3 years you've been betraying everything this family stands for. I love him, Isabella said, and even as the words left her mouth, she knew how naive they sounded. How childish. Love? Her father laughed, a harsh bitter sound. You think love matters? You think love means anything in our world? Your mother loved me once. Look where that got her, dead at 42 because someone decided to send me a message. Isabella flinched. Her mother had died in a car bombing when Isabella was 16. Collateral damage in a war between families. Marco is different, Isabella insisted. He's not like the others. He wants out of this life too. We've been planning what? To run away together. To play house and pretend you're not who you are. Domenico moved closer, his face inches from hers. You are a Valentino. That doesn't go away because you fall in love with a pretty face. Your blood is my blood. Your loyalty belongs to this family. Not to some Castellano bastard who probably started fucking you as a way to gather intelligence on us. That's not true, isn't it? How many times did he ask about the business, Isabella? How many pillow talk conversations did you have about family operations? Isabella's mind raced back through 3 years of conversations. Marco had asked questions, yes, but no more than she had asked him. They had both been curious about each other's lives, both trying to understand the worlds they came from. Hadn't they? Doubt crept in like poison, and her father saw it. You see? Domenico said softly. You see how easy it is to manipulate someone who wants to believe in love. This is why we don't allow attachments outside the family. This is why we maintain control. Because the moment you let your guard down, the moment you trust someone, they destroy you. What are you going to do? Isabella whispered. What I should have done the moment I found out. Her father moved back to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. Bring him in. 2 minutes later, the office doors opened. Isabella's uncle, her father's enforcer, dragged in a figure with a bag over his head, hands zip-tied behind his back. When the bag came off, Isabella's world stopped. Marco's face was bruised and swollen, blood crusting under his nose. But his eyes, his beautiful brown eyes, found hers immediately. And in them, she saw not fear, but apology. Marco, Isabella breathed, starting toward him, but her father's bodyguards held her back. Did you know? Isabella demanded, staring at Marco. Did you use me? No, Marco said immediately, his voice hoarse. Isabella, no. I love you. Everything between us was real. Then why do I have intelligence reports, Domenico said, pulling out a folder, that show Marco Castellano feeding information about our operations to his father for the past 2 years? Why do I have evidence that 3 of our busts, 2 of our deals falling through, and the death of your cousin Salvatore all link back to information only you knew, Isabella? The words hit her like bullets. Salvatore. Her favorite cousin. Dead 6 months ago in what they had thought was a random ambush. Marco? Isabella's voice broke. Tell me it's not true. Marco's silence was answer enough. Tell me. Isabella screamed, struggling against the men holding her. My father found out about us, Marco said finally, his voice dead. A year ago. He said he'd kill you if I didn't cooperate. Said he'd make it slow. So I gave him information. Small things at first. Things I thought wouldn't hurt anyone. But then Salvatore, his voice cracked. I never meant for anyone to die, Isabella. I was trying to protect you. By betraying my family. Isabella's voice was ice now, all the warmth bleeding out of her. By getting my cousin killed. I had no choice, there's always a choice. Isabella shouted. You chose your fear over my family. You chose to betray me. And what would you have chosen? Marco shot back. If your father had given you the same ultimatum, betray me or watch me die, what would you have done, Isabella? Can you honestly tell me you would have chosen differently? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Isabella opened her mouth to answer and found she couldn't. Because she didn't know. God help her, she didn't know. That's what I thought, Marco said softly. Domenico watched this exchange with cold calculation. Here's what's going to happen, he said finally. Young Mr. Castellano is going to return to his father with a message. The Valentinos know about the intelligence leak. We know about the betrayal. And we're coming for repayment. He smiled, showing teeth. As for you, Isabella, you have a choice to make. What choice? You can stay loyal to this family, your blood, your legacy, everything you are. Help me destroy the Castellanos once and for all, starting with the man who manipulated you, used you, and got your cousin killed. He paused. Or you can choose him. Walk out that door with Marco Castellano, and you're no longer my daughter. No longer a Valentino. You'll be hunted by both families until one of us gets to you. And trust me, we will get to you. Isabella looked between her father and Marco, feeling like she was being torn in half. Marco's eyes pleaded with her. Isabella, please. We can run. Leave all of this behind. Start over somewhere they can't find us. They'll always find us, Isabella whispered. You know that. There's no running from this. Then we fight. Together. Fight two mafia families. Marco, that's suicide. Living without you is suicide, Marco said desperately. Choose me, Isabella. Choose love. Choose the life we planned. Isabella turned to her father. And if I choose you? If I stay loyal to the family? Then you prove you're my daughter. You prove you have Valentino blood. And you help me end this war the way it should have ended 70 years ago. Domenico's smile was predatory. We destroy the Castellanos. All of them. Including Marco. The unspoken words hummed between them. Isabella, Marco whispered. Please. She looked at him, this man she had loved for 3 years, this man who had made her feel seen and valued and real. This man who had also betrayed her family and gotten her cousin killed, even if he claimed it was to protect her. Could she forgive that? Could love survive that kind of betrayal? More importantly, could she betray her own blood, her father, her family, everyone she had ever known, for a man who had already proven he would betray her to save himself? I need time, Isabella said finally. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow night, Domenico said. We're hosting a celebration at the estate. Every major family in New York will be there. It's the perfect opportunity to make a statement. He looked meaningfully at Marco. One way or another. That night, as Isabella lay in her childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, meet me at our apartment. One last time. Please. I can explain everything. She should have deleted it. Should have told her father. Instead, she got dressed and slipped out of the estate, driving to Jersey City to that little apartment where they had spent so many stolen hours. Marco was waiting for her, his face still bruised but his eyes desperate with hope. Thank you for coming, he said as she closed the door behind her. I shouldn't be here. But you are. That has to mean something. Isabella leaned against the door, maintaining distance between them. Explain. Make me understand how loving me led to my cousin's death. For the next hour, Marco told her everything. How his father Antonio had discovered their relationship and threatened to kill not just Isabella but her entire family if Marco didn't cooperate. How he had tried to feed Antonio useless information at first, trying to protect everyone. How it had escalated, how Antonio had demanded more, how Marco had felt trapped between two impossible choices. Salvatore's death broke me, Marco said, his voice raw. I never gave them information about that operation. Someone else betrayed it. But my father told everyone it was my intelligence that led to it, so I couldn't back out. He had me trapped. You could have told me, Isabella said. We could have figured something out together. How? Tell you my father was blackmailing me to betray your family? You would have been forced to choose right then. At least this way, I bought us time. I thought I could find a way out, a way to protect you and still keep my father satisfied. I was wrong. Isabella moved to the window, looking out at the New York skyline. My father wants me to help him destroy your entire family. Including you. And what do you want? I want to go back to before any of this happened, Isabella said. I want to go back to that first day in the coffee shop when everything was simple. When it was just two people falling in love instead of all this blood and loyalty and impossible choices. Marco moved behind her, close but not touching. We can still have that. Run away with me, Isabella. Tonight. Right now. We'll disappear. Change our names. Build a new life somewhere they'll never find us. They'll find us, Isabella said. My father won't rest until he does. Neither will yours. Then we make it worth it. However long we have, we make it count. Isabella turned to face him, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I love you. God help me, I still love you. But I don't know if I can trust you anymore. And without trust, what do we have? A chance, Marco said desperately, taking her hands. A chance to build something real. To choose each other over this world that's trying to destroy us. Or we both end up dead within a year. Then we die together. Isn't that better than living apart, always wondering what might have been? Isabella pulled her hands away, stepping back. I need to think. I need time. We're out of time, Isabella. Tomorrow night at that party, everything ends. One way or another. Marco's voice broke. Please. Choose me. Choose us. Choose love over blood. Isabella walked to the door, her hand on the knob. She turned back one last time to look at him, the man who had been her secret joy for 3 years, the man who had betrayed her family, the man who was asking her to betray everything she had ever known. I'll see you tomorrow night, she said quietly. At the party. Whatever I decide, you'll know then. She left before he could say anything else, before she could change her mind, before she could make a choice she wasn't ready to make. Part 4, The party. The Valentino estate blazed with lights on the night of the celebration. 300 of New York's most dangerous men filled the marble halls and gardens, celebrating what they thought was just another display of Valentino power. They had no idea they were attending the opening shots of a war. Isabella dressed carefully that night in the blood-red gown that would later be photographed in every newspaper. Red for courage. Red for anger. Red for the blood that would be spilled before the night was over. She had made her choice. God help her, she had made her choice. As she descended the grand staircase into the ballroom, she saw Marco immediately. He stood on the opposite side of the room with his father Antonio and several Castellano soldiers, all of them dressed in dark suits like they were attending a funeral. Maybe they were. Marco's eyes found hers across the crowded room, and she saw the hope there. The desperate belief that she would choose him, that love would win, that fairy tales could come true even in a world built on violence. She looked away. Isabella made her way to her father's side. Domenico stood on a raised platform at the head of the room, surveying his kingdom with the satisfaction of a king. When he saw her join him, he smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since he discovered her betrayal. My daughter, he said loudly, silencing the room. Tonight, we celebrate not just our family's power, but its future. Isabella has reminded me that loyalty is everything. That blood is everything. And that those who betray us, he looked directly at the Castellanos, must face consequences. Isabella felt the gun in her father's hand before she saw it. He pressed it into her palm, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. Prove yourself. Prove you're my daughter. Kill the man who betrayed us, and this war ends before it begins. Refuse, and I'll kill you both. The weight of the pistol in her hand felt like the weight of the world. Across the room, Marco's face went white. He understood. He saw the gun, saw her father's challenge, and he understood that she had made her choice. Or had she? Isabella raised the gun, pointing it directly at Marco. The room erupted in shouts and movement, Castellano men reaching for weapons, Valentino soldiers moving to intercept, civilians scrambling for exits. But Isabella's hand was steady. Her eyes were clear. And when she pulled the trigger, the shot echoed through the ballroom like thunder. The bullet didn't hit Marco. It hit the man standing directly behind him, Antonio Castellano. The man who had forced his own son to betray the woman he loved. The man who had orchestrated the violence and blackmail that had destroyed their relationship. The man who had made this all inevitable. Antonio fell backward, blood blooming across his white shirt, his eyes wide with shock. In the chaos that followed, screams, gunfire, men diving for cover, Isabella turned the gun on her own father. "You wanted consequences," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Here they are." Domenico Valentino stared down the barrel of the gun held by his own daughter, and for the first time in his life, looked uncertain. "You're choosing him," Domenico said. "Not a question. An accusation." "I'm choosing me," Isabella corrected. "I'm choosing to not be like you. To not let fear and blood loyalty destroy everything good in this world." "Isabella," Marco's voice came from behind her. "Stay back," she commanded without turning around. To her father, "You said I had to prove I was a Valentino. Consider this proof. I'm strong enough to walk away. I'm strong enough to end this cycle of violence and revenge that has destroyed 3 generations of our families. I'm strong enough to choose a different path. If you walk out that door," Domenico said quietly, "you're no longer my daughter. I stopped being your daughter the moment you asked me to kill the man I love to prove my loyalty." Isabella lowered the gun, placing it carefully on the platform. "I'm done." She turned and walked toward Marco, who stood frozen in the center of the chaos, his father's blood pooling at his feet. "Are you with me?" she asked, extending her hand. Marco looked at his dying father, at the Castellano men who were calling for his decision, at the empire and legacy and blood loyalty that had defined his entire existence. Then he looked at Isabella, this woman who had just burned her entire world down for the chance to build something new with him. He took her hand. Together, they walked through the ballroom toward the exit, through the shocked faces of men who had never imagined anyone could choose love over power. Behind them, Domenico Valentino's voice rang out, "If you leave, you're both dead. Both families will hunt you. There's nowhere you can hide." Isabella turned back one last time. "Then we'll die together. But at least we'll die free." They disappeared into the night, leaving behind the only world they had ever known, trading security and power for uncertainty and danger and a chance, just a chance, at something real. Epilogue. 5 years later the sunset from their porch in Tuscany painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Isabella Santorini, her new name, her new identity, sat with her hand resting on her pregnant belly, watching Marco play with their 3-year-old daughter Sofia in the garden. They had made it. Against all odds, despite both families searching for them for 2 years before finally giving up, despite changing identities and countries and living on the run, they had built something real. "Mama!" Sofia called, her dark curls bouncing as she ran toward the porch. "Papa says I'm fast like you." "The fastest," Isabella agreed, pulling her daughter into her lap. Marco joined them, pressing a kiss to Isabella's temple as he sat beside her. They bore the scars of their escape, physical and emotional wounds that would never fully heal. They lived with the knowledge that at any moment, someone from their past could find them. But they also lived with something neither of them had ever expected to have, peace. "Do you regret it?" Marco asked quietly, the question he still asked sometimes when the shadows got too long. "Never," Isabella said, the answer she always gave because it was always true. She had chosen love over blood. Had chosen freedom over power. Had chosen a dangerous uncertain future over a secure violent past. And every single day, watching Marco with their daughter, feeling the baby move inside her, looking out at the life they had built from the ashes of their old world, she knew she had made the right choice. Some love was worth dying for. But the best love was worth living for. Worth fighting for. Worth burning your entire world down for. Isabella had learned that lesson in a ballroom filled with broken glass and impossible choices. And she had never looked back. Behind them, the sun set on their old lives. Ahead of them, uncertain and beautiful and terrifying and real, stretched the life they had chosen together. And that made all the difference.